Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams. It's good to see you, Daniel.
Good morning, Dr. Ball.
Well, I'd like to talk about the Middle East. There's a war going on over there, and we've been involved over there for, 25 years, if you count the first Persian Gulf War. It's still ongoing, but there's a little bit of talk of expanding the war, that the Saudis, for whatever reason, they have their own, are talking about 150,000 troops going into Syria, which I rather doubt. But I wanted to put up a map of that just to refresh our memory on the countries that surround Syria and indicate, just what's going on here. Now, Syria, of course, is in the blue, sort of to the left, and at the top there you can see Aleppo, which is a major area right now because what's going on, the way I see it, is Aleppo has been controlled by the rebels and they're about to lose it because Russia, along with Hezbollah and tacit, if not actual support from Iran, they changed this. But it's easy to see, that I don't see any U.S. property, but I bet if we had all U.S. Bases lined up there, there'd be a lot of U.S. bases. But soon Iran is there, and if you think about the Kurds, Iran, Iraq, and Turkey's all involved there. So it is a major hotspot in the world. But I cannot imagine 150,000 Iraqi or Saudi troops going in there. And the announcement was they were going to join a U.S.-led force. I have my doubts whether we're going to be sending in any ground troops because we're backing away. 5 years ago, it was announced, Assad had to go. Looks like he's pretty stubborn. So what do you think is going to happen? What are the odds of 150,000 troops going in there? I just can't believe they're that nutty. But I do worry about danger. I think the danger's there whether they actually go through or not because you can always have false flags and accidents happen.
Well, I think this might be somewhat of a trial balloon because we saw the Geneva talks fizzled before they really started, and there are a number of reasons for that. Prime among them being that the rebels that the U.S. and the Saudis wanted at the table were not willing to talk. They wanted Russia to stop bombing them first. The other was that the U.S. insisted that the rebels in Syria be represented by an al-Qaeda affiliated group, which exposes the myth that there are a moderate rebel force ready to take over Syria. But on this 150,000, the Saudis suggested that actually it was a U.S. idea, and the U.S. is putting them up to it. And there are some reports that people like Joe Biden are getting frustrated and want to make a desperation move. This may be a threat to try to get people back to the table in Geneva, but the fact of the matter is, as you pointed out, this would pit Saudi Arabia against Iran directly, and against Russia directly, possibly against Turkey because the invasion is supposed to go through Turkey. This, to me, if it's serious, sounds like the opening salvo of World War III.
Common sense would dictate that none of this should happen. We shouldn't be there, but common sense doesn't prevail. But common sense for Saudi Arabia has to take into consideration, their bank account is getting smaller, their income is going way down, they're starting to pinch pennies. At the same time, the competition, because of world events, Iran is going to be allowed to ship out oil, and they are, and that isn't going to be solved. So I would think they'd be very reluctant. So your argument that maybe they're only responding to our pressure, and that generally happens too often, that we want to run the show. But I think not only does Obama know it, but I think even a Republican president would know no troops on the ground. So even the most hawkish Republican candidates aren't saying, well, a couple of them are sending troops, but I think most of them know, the American people know that's a big step over. Unfortunately, though, they're too careless of allowing it to escalate. Bombing is okay and sanctions are okay, not realizing that those are acts of war. And that's what we started in Iraq here in 1991, bombing and sanctions, and it's turned out to be a mess. So I think that people who have the advantage in war won't always be the most powerful military. Sometimes it's the one who has the moral high ground and has the support of the people. And the one example that I'm more familiar with was, Vietnam. Just think of the weaponry we had and the stupidity that we said, well, we never lost one military battle in Vietnam. Yes, but as the Vietnamese general said, that's totally irrelevant because the people didn't want any outsiders. So this is the same thing here. Who has the moral high ground? It looks like Assad may have had the moral high ground, or why wouldn't, if they were really as tired of him as we said they were, why wouldn't there have been just, and they were getting support, why wouldn't there have been an overwhelming uprising and marched on the capital and get rid of Assad? But that never seems to have happened.
Well, Syria has been a secular country, and I think when they got a good look of what the rebels look like, forcing the women to cover up and forcing Sharia law, they realized they didn't want to go with that. But this whole idea of a Saudi invasion is absurd on the face because they claim they're going to invade Syria to get rid of ISIS and the terrorists. Whereas everyone who's been paying attention knows for 4 years they've been backing and funding Al-Qaeda and ISIS,
And yet the American people have been fooled into this. Anytime you say, I'm after ISIS, it's a political plus for them.
Yeah, even though they've been funding them all this time.
And I think the Russians have really played their cards right from a political viewpoint. Is they're the only ones really have put a damper on ISIS, and yet unfortunately the American people don't know that, and that is what's helped. So we have taken this impossible position that we have to destroy ISIS, but we want to destroy Assad, so we want to preserve ISIS, so ISIS will destroy Assad. I mean, it's insanity.
It reminds you of the Iran-Iraq War, where we changed sides just to hoping that they would kill each other more and more, But I think the precipitating factor for this whole sort of new round of pushing for these troops and everything is the fall of Aleppo, which you pointed out earlier. And this really is the sort of end of the war, essentially. If the rebels, let's remember, this is al-Nusra Front that is big in Aleppo. This is Al-Qaeda, who is ostensibly our enemy. These are the ones that are getting routed in Aleppo. When that is done, there'll basically be nothing but desert between the Syrian army and Iraq. So this is their last chance. What is so surprising is that we have John Kerry demanding that the Russians stop bombing and stop taking Aleppo. They're taking Al-Qaeda. These are people we supposedly don't like.
Well, what percentage of the rebels, we know there's a lot of groups, and early on we never knew which one to support, or if they did, they were doing the wrong ones all the time. But wonder what percentage of the true rebels are Syrians, or how many have come in. If they're foreigners, that makes my case stronger for who has the moral high ground, because if the true Syrians right now, most of them are trying to survive, the ones that have been really butchered. So if this was a true rebellion against Assad, there wouldn't be tens of thousands of Syrians running away. They'd be, well, let's get rid of Assad. Evidently, they're not motivated to do this. So there must be, is there one faction more than another that have joined the rebel forces, or are they just miscellaneous from the various different countries?
Well, there are a lot of Saudis, there are a lot of Libyans, there are Moroccans, they've come from all over the area to come fight the jihad in Syria. But you're right, this isn't a homegrown. It started as a homegrown kind of color revolution in the Arab Spring, and there were people who were genuinely upset. If you remember, it started out, I think it was the price of bread or something, an economic factor. Yeah, it caused them to have some demonstrations in the street, and that was immediately exploited by an armed insurgent. So you gin the people up, and everyone who's not unhappy with the economy these days, unhappy with the economy, people are in the streets, and then you start with an armed rebellion, and that's what happened.
I think that economic issue is so often forgotten, but I think it is a motivation for a lot of disturbances and rebellion in the country. And that is something, of course, I've been concerned about, is what's going to be like when this country, has to face up to the bankruptcy. We have 45 million getting food stamps, but what if our monetary system continues to collapse? How are they going to feed everybody? It's going to be a very, very bad scene, and it will be economics, but it will be turned into violence. But then it will be the state that will attack, the street demonstrators. Oh, they're motivated by communism Zionism and all kinds of things, and there'll be some jihadists there, and they can blame Islam for the whole thing, rather than ever looking at decades of a grossly misdirected economy, whether it's monetary policy or spending or debt, that we'll face that problem, and then the people are going to be very disturbed. And I think is what's happened in some of these other countries.
And look at the militarization of the police in the U.S. They're ready for it.
Yeah. But Syria and Iran didn't let this go by without voicing a little bit of opposition to these troops coming in. Because here's one headline: it says, "Syria and Iran warn Saudis against sending troops who would, quote, return in wooden boxes," end of quote. Now, I don't know whether that's going to scare anybody away, but I would think they're being very serious that it's not going to be an easy fight. And once again, it's going to depend on a lot of factors. But I just don't know what type of event could change this, but there's always some event that can change it, whether it's deliberate or an accident, where one side gets blamed for the other side, and that arouses the emotions, because the American people aren't ready for expanding it, and they don't follow how much it's really costing us. So in order to get the American people really riled up, the false flag might have to be here in this country. There's been problems here, but compared to what? Compared to the drug war, nothing. Yeah. And yet the American people are sort of supporting the Republicans. That's carpet bomb. That's carpet bomb. And there's a few on the top tier right now, and that's all they're saying. So something here could be used as an example of why we have to go over there so they don't come here. And that, to me, should be a big concern for us.
And you mentioned the response from Syria and Iran, but there was also response from Russia. The head of the State Duma committee said the Saudi invasion would be a declaration of war. So apparently the Russians take it very seriously too. The other issue that we haven't talked about very much is apparently this invasion should take place through Turkey. Now you wonder, the Turks, by and large, I think, are increasingly frustrated with Erdogan and his aggressive foreign policy. At what point do they rise up, or at what point does the Turkish military rise up and say, enough of this?
And it seems like if they paid a little bit of attention, not that I'm the expert on Syria-Turkish relations, but it seems like they've lived next door to each other for a long time. And this looks like, if that happens, this looks like they're trying to change all that, when they're participating in overthrowing Assad and marching through and doing all these things. So outsiders generally are, manipulators, and they cause a lot of problem. And unfortunately, it's not easy to critique our own government, but we are the outsiders too often, and we're not championing the cause of liberty and sound money. We're claiming that our bombs are spreading American exceptionalism. That's just so disgusting that we can go over and kill people and say we're exceptional, and the politicians are so dedicated to that. Then if you don't accept that, you're unpatriotic, and that you don't care, and you're going to lead to danger to the country if you don't accept this idea that there's a grave danger posed by these individuals.
I think it was Putin that was quoted yesterday. He said, yeah, I understand the Americans feel like they're an exceptional country. We understand that. We also feel that we're an exceptional country, but we're not trying to push our exceptionalism on anyone else.
It sort of is so aggravating to look at that and become a little more sympathetic to what they're saying versus ours. But the one thing that I learned early on when people hit me hard for saying, well, you're unpatriotic, is that patriotism, of course, has been misused and abused and make people do the wrong things. But I think in a true sense of the way, are people who are willing to speak up about our government and say that they're wrong. Edward Snowden, as far as I'm concerned, is a patriot. He gets up there and he told the truth about what was going on, and that if you come around to believing that truth is treason and an empire lies, we have an empire, and they can only withstand the forces if they keep lying to us. And now I think we're moving in the right directions, because the American people by percentages, are overwhelmingly skeptical of government. You know, we hear this in the campaign. Unfortunately, they're not saying we need less government. We are just saying, well, we need somebody else to act like the government who will do a better job, and the old group is bad. And I don't think that'll work. I think power is corrupting, and that they get in and they change. The only thing that will ever help preserve our liberties would be a government strictly limited in power. That, of course, what was intended by the founders, strictly limiting the power, especially of the executive branch and that of the federal government. And that was the whole purpose of the Constitution, but we have lost that. So just changing, our directors in Washington won't help that at all. Matter of fact, there is so much more power now to the politicians because the executive branch does whatever it wants. And I think the noise I hear from many of the candidates is that they would be quite willing to use executive orders to go about and do whatever they want because they would know what is right. And I think the answer to it is recognizing that individuals, when they're put in government, do a great deal of harm. The whole effort should be to restraining the power of those individuals in government. And you would say, yes, but aren't there a lot of bad people out there? There are, and there are problems, but the way our country was set up, our states were supposed to deal with criminality. We weren't supposed to have a standing army like we have now. We have hundreds of thousands of bureaucrats policing us, and a lot of them have guns. So it's a far cry from what was intended, and we have deteriorated, we have lost our confidence, and the cause of liberty has been squelched to a degree, except for a growing number of people right now are being reintroduced to the modern understanding of individual liberty, and that's where I have my hope and my optimism, because only the ideas of liberty can confront the abusive powers that exist today, not just changing the head of government. That will not do it. We have to think very seriously about what is a government like if the purpose of government is to protect liberty and not to tell us how to live and not to run the economy and not to police the world. When that time comes, then we will be an exceptional nation. Hopefully it will come soon. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today, and come back soon.